So thank you so much. And so as we go through this, a couple of things for everyone to think about. We did not do a PowerPoint presentation because we wanted to have this more conversational, but we are going to share some, we're going to share our screens as we go through some activities together. So make sure to have pen and paper. Take screenshots as you need because our activity at the end, I don't expect anyone to fully finish, but I want to start you thinking about your unique value for your search. I want you to come away with some really good start on your unique value. And so we'll be doing this through a guided activity. So a little bit about what we're going to do, talk a little bit about why this is important, the unique value for the executive job search. Leslie's going to talk a little bit about how to weave that into an executive resume, what an executive resume should look like, what it should include, and how you're weaving that unique value in throughout the documents by sharing a couple real life resumes that we've taken contact information and, any identifiers out of, certainly. Uh, and then we're going to try it together. We're going to go through an activity together to start thinking about identifying your own unique value in the market. So a little bit about unique value. This is not a unique value statement. So I know a lot of people think about the unique value as a statement, maybe 2 to 3 sentences identifying you in the market. That is important as well. But really what we're thinking about today as it relates to this conversation is more about the attributes and what you bring in your value, right? There's a lot of things that make you uniquely qualified to do the work that you're going to do. And so it's not necessarily a branding statement, but it's more of the things that you want to weave throughout all of your career assets, your interview, your networking conversations. And so it's not necessarily going to be an elevator pitch, but more of a concept, right? And so I'm going to pause there. If you guys have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. We will also take questions at the end as well, and happy to stay a little over if some people are really into it and we have some questions that come through, right? Um, so to get started, why is this important? Unique value is so incredibly important in the executive job search because the executive job search is different. And if anyone's heard me speak, you've heard me say this before, but it is a different animal. And you have to come to the table with a different level of career assets, with a different mindset of how you're going to compete because most of our clients have built amazing careers through their network, getting promoted, getting recruited. You're pulled along throughout your career. You're walking through the doors that open, and that's amazing. And now you found yourself at a place where you have to take yourself to market for the first time at this level. And what does that look like? And how do you compete? And all we have are the tools and the techniques we were taught when we first came out of college or B school, right? That's not appropriate anymore at your level. And where you used to compete with people earlier in their careers, and there were, say, a lot of roles at a company, right? Maybe you were applying for a marketing role, and there's a lot of roles in marketing. Now you're applying for the top role against people with the top accomplishments and expertise, right? The absolute best in your field, and for precious few opportunities. And that doesn't mean it's impossible, but it means we have to come equipped differently. And so if your resume starts with seasoned executive with 20 years of experience in marketing leadership, driving growth, that's not going to set you apart. That's table stakes to get in the door, but it's not going to cause anyone to want to interview you and talk more about it. So that's where we want to think about where are we using our highest level, um, our most valuable real estate on the resume in LinkedIn and all of these areas to really set us apart from our peers because 20 years of leadership in your function and industry is not setting you apart. So we want to think about how we do that differently. And Lesley has some amazing options to show us and ways that she's done this for clients to kind of take you through the thought process of what this looks like. So I'm going to stop yapping and hand the floor over to Lesley for a little while.
Awesome. I'm really excited to go with you all over some examples today. I will go through various parts of a resume, some you may be familiar with, but just go through kind of the function of each section of the resume, and as well as show you how you can incorporate your unique value proposition into your resume. So this is one example, Andrea Smith, quote unquote, as we changed her name to. And to give a little bit of background, Andrea Smith is a chief medical officer, but she was really going for CEO roles, growth roles beyond just the clinical aspect. So she really wanted to appeal to hiring managers and companies where she could go into more of that business and growth, innovation, transformation. So not simply pigeonhole her to the clinical side of the business. So with that said, we'll kind of hop in and I'll briefly describe a header. So header will include your name, usually in bold or larger fonts. If you have any particular degrees. Normally, we'll just focus on a doctorate. In this case, Andrea wanted to again show her business side and her clinical side, hence why the MBA was included. And again, in the header, you'll also have your contact information, city, state, as you can see, phone number, email, and linked. Usually, we'll hyperlink the LinkedIn profile to this LinkedIn verbiage. What's optional but highly suggested for executive level is professional title, which can include either your current role or your desired role. So in this case, she is going for more of that transformative healthcare transformation type roles. So even though she is a CMO, we wanted to really highlight that she's interested in that healthcare transformation or those jobs that emphasize those skills. And so moving on to the executive summary or profile, that's what's here. By the way, I highlighted these areas to show you all different things, obviously on the actual resume that she submitted. They weren't highlighted, but it's all to tie back to this unique value proposition. So in this section, we'll usually have 3 to 5 sentences, and it will be a high-level overview of your career, key achievements, leadership style, and what you bring to the table. So this section should position you as a results-oriented leader and set the tone for the rest of the resume. This section you can focus also and weave in your unique value proposition. With that said, when you're crafting your executive profile, executive summary and your UVP within that. Keep in mind a statement that Michelle Merritt, our Chief Strategy Officer, said. She's actually on this call. She mentions that the resume is about you, not for you. So with that said, it's very important your UVP and executive summary should set you apart, but it should also highlight strengths and skills that align with the particular roles and organizational needs that you're targeting. So just to keep that in mind as well. So going over a little bit of this executive summary and the highlighted sections to me represented her unique value. I'll read through a few. So the first line, transformative executive and growth driver, experience in every aspect of the healthcare sector for over 20 years, from startup to Fortune 50 operations, and from fee for service to value-based care models. So this line shows that she has a depth and breadth of experience within the sector, also different businesses as well, types of business from the startup to the Fortune 50, and breadth of knowledge of different healthcare models. So that kind of shows her broad knowledge. And the second line, recognized for catapulting expansion of a disease management company. We have some quantifiable results, 1,400%, which is huge, across 37 states, doubled the EBITDA in 1 year, and mentioning that she grows practices and organizations from ground up to a #1 market leader. So this just shows that she's not just the clinical side, she's very much a growth agent. She's propelling growth. So that is a huge part of her unique value, that she really knows how to get in there and transform and grow businesses to be #1 even in their market. So that's huge. Other aspects of her UVP are that she's very much an influencer, mentioned by the inspiring people leader. So she's that leader, as well as does a lot of thought leadership, speaking before the media, serves as the face of multiple innovative companies. So in this case, her three main components of her UVP are her diverse experience throughout the sector, different companies, her expansive growth, how she really leads companies to #1 market leader in the top, and the thought leadership and kind of face of type qualities. So you'll see that kind of weave in and out throughout the resume. And also, Deborah, if you have any input or anything, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in real quick before you move to the
Yes.
career progression. So, two things. Is this landing with people? How are you feeling? Is this helpful if you want to pop in the chat? if you can see kind of how you may think about your own unique value. Um, and and the other thing is, so she, Lesley brought up a couple of good points. She said you want to focus on being a results oriented leader. And I want you to see how she showed that, didn't tell it, right? She didn't say she's a results oriented leader because that everyone can say that without adding results oriented leader. She showed the results, right? She's showing them that she's qualified, not telling them, right? And so it makes it more specific. And we're going to do this together in our activity, but she had a very specific target job, right? She wanted to be a business leader in healthcare. And so as she thinks about that target audience, this unique value proposition was built directly for her. So, so as you think about, you have to have a really clear target to know who you're talking to. And Lesley did a really great job of working with this client to really figure that out. So anyway, I just wanted to add those couple of thoughts. But thank you, everyone, for your feedback in the chat. That's helpful to know it's landing.
Yeah, absolutely. Want to know that you guys are not only following along, but really enjoying it as well. So definitely thanks for your feedback too. And okay, so moving to second section or third in this case, core competencies and key skills. So this will be a section that will normally have roughly 7 to 15 bullets, highlighting your most relevant skills, expertise, and areas of proficiency. And of course, as mentioned before, you want to target those skills mentioned to the jobs that appeal to you. I know many people on this call may not be applying through the normal online application process, but in the case that you are applying online, I definitely suggest to incorporate keywords from job descriptions in your skills section and throughout the resume to optimize for applicant tracking systems so that your resume has a higher chance of passing through that ATS and getting into the hands of hiring managers. And so I highlighted a few of the skills for Andrea that apply to her unique value proposition. So growth strategy is one. As mentioned, she's really marketing herself and her UVP or unique value proposition as a growth agent, scaling these companies, getting them to number one, et cetera. And the startup to enterprise leadership skill is really showing that diverse experience again. And thought leadership, media relations kind of go to her influencer type of skills that she brings. So those are just some examples. And of course, any other applicable skills that you want to include that target your job are great, but always keeping in mind skills that also directly correlate to the unique value that you're marketing yourself towards these companies. And so moving on to professional experience section. In this case, experience will be reverse chronological order, so your most recent position and then working back. For executive resumes, typically we want to focus on the last 10 to 15 years of experience. Sometimes can extend a little further back, but 10 to 15 is really key for executive resumes. For board resumes, 20 plus is not uncommon as boards regularly look for more seasoned and experienced individuals. So as you'll see in the experience section, we want to list out the company name, a company description, brief company description if you can, under company one. The description is PE-backed provider of home-delivered medical suppliers to customers with chronic conditions, and then the revenue is mentioned. So in a brief description, you'll just very shortly describe maybe what the company provides, and then if you know like an employee count or revenue, annual revenue, that's good to include as well. And then of course you'll list your title. And underneath the title, usually a couple or few sentences describing the function of your role, just to give a little bit of background. But then when we get to the bullet points, these are really going to be the key achievements, points that summarize and focus on your measurable outcomes. So if possible, revenue growth, cost savings, market expansion. You can also illustrate strengths in team leadership, leading strategic initiatives, and highlight any business challenges that you overcame. So this is really the area, these bullets and key achievements under experience section, to really show your impact. So, for example, I'll go through the highlighted first point under company one, transform the perception of company one from a diabetes device supplier to a healthcare services company. So, in this case, it's not only showing an achievement that Andrea did execute, but it is also tying back to her UVP of being able to be an influencer, be transformative, and completely change the perception of that company. The second highlighted section and the third bullet mentions that she influenced investors and successfully positioned the company for sale. So again, it's kind of leaning into that influencer aspect that she has. And same with this last bullet, she pioneered or executed a peer-reviewed research initiative, and it really did impact her industry and competitors and influence people in her industry to take that research and apply it for modifying coverage policies and change within the industry. So again, just kind of showing her as that transformative and an influential mover and shaker. I won't go through all of these, but I'll mention
Real
with
quick,
company
before I'm going to
two and
hop in
kind
real quick
of
before you move to
yeah,
company two.
yeah,
Um, this is incredibly helpful, I think, for people to see, when you come, when you're used to seeing the resumes, maybe right out of B school, things like that, it's, company name and then the bullets, right? But at your level, what you want to think about is that upside down triangle setting the stage of the context of your work. So you start broad with the company description. And the reason you're adding that company description is to add context to what comes below, right? So people understand what kind of an organization you are at, what's the ownership structure, how large is it, what's the revenue, number of states it operates in, whatever's important to your market and your industry. Then you have the blurb about setting the stage of your area of purview, right? Your area that falls under your umbrella, what you were hired to do, whether you were hired, recruited, promoted, whatever that is to that role, who you report to, if you manage a budget, if you manage a team, how large is that? Like you're setting the stage. And then below that is just accomplishments. And I want you to see in Lesley's example here, she has 4 or 5 accomplishments for this person over the course of how many years? 3, 4 years? We're not
yes.
listing everything we've ever done in every role. We're listing the most notable highlights as they relate to your ideal role, right? You're not having huge blocks of text because number one, no one's going to read it. The only person who's ever going to read your resume word for word are you, your resume writer, if you're working with one, and your mom, and no one else cares. So you need to think about how we are only listing the most impactful things. And that way her impact doesn't get lost in the details. So I want you to think about, and we'll talk about this, but what your ideal audience cares about, and then just speaking to that.
Yes. I totally back that, by the way. And yes, and I guess moving on to this next company, and maybe something to keep in mind as well. On the first bullet, as Deborah was mentioning, just not including everything, but showing that impact. And then this first point, spurred sales growth by 30% in 3 months. It's going back to the fact that Andrea is can transform and execute and spearhead growth. But as you'll mention here as well, we mentioned the results first and the impact first. And then she kind of mentions how she did that through, or helped her to show how she did that through implementing technology and predictive analytics, etc. But the key is also when you're going through and writing out your key achievements to really show what the impact and the quantifiable results first, if you can, just as a reminder or mention there. And yes, let's see here. Same with moving down to company three, listing several of her accomplishments. Again, this driving the 80% increase in market access is showing that expansive growth that she's really good at doing, and completely revamping company brands. Is, kind of shows both within company three and company four, and repositioning a brand entirely. Again, it kind of goes to her transformative aspects of completely changing perceptions of companies, brands of companies, etc. And in company four, again, mentioning this growth statistic, which is really amazing. And yes, throughout the resume, you can kind of see that these different achievements that she has done that kind of go back to everything mentioned in her UVP. So it's always great to list your key achievements, but as Deborah mentioned, we don't want to list everything that you've done or be too overwhelming for the hiring manager. We want them to look at your resume and really say, oh, these are amazing points. So really focusing on those achievements that show the most impact and again, tie back to your unique value proposition. And then going to the different sections of the resume, education usually directly follows the experience. In this case, normally we'll put the highest degree first. In this case of Andrea, she really wanted to emphasize her MBA experience as well to kind of, again, not pigeonhole her within that just clinical area. So in this case, we did put the MBA above. Normally put your highest level of degree. And then this mentioning the Doctor of Medicine and the MBA obviously, again, emphasizes that clinical with the business bridge of experience she has. And then other sections of resume can include affiliation, such as in this case, I, to you all, highlighted women business leaders in healthcare because it's just showing an organization that really stresses leadership in her sector, and she is seen as an industry pioneer. So that was good to mention, as well as these other areas as well. And it's great that she also serves as a strategic advisor, which kind of, again, establishes her influence and her expertise within her industry. There are other sections of a resume that can be included as well, such as thought leadership, honors and awards. If you've achieved a good amount of honors and awards, especially over the past current and recent years, I would definitely suggest to include those as well. And then I will briefly bring up another resume example. Jump in, Deborah.
Can we go back to the other
Yes.
one real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, friends. Another really important section that Lesley added here that people sometimes either miss or don't know where to add or things like this is right here. This previous roles include. So she has going back to 2009, but obviously as an executive, you have a lot of experience before that. And what do you do with it without adding ageism, things like this, is we can add a line for previous roles. And that way you can still, if there's important company names or titles you've held in the past that you want to highlight, you don't have to highlight everything. You can just focus on the ones that are most important for you. And it also shows that you didn't, hatch out of an egg in 2009 as a founder and CEO, right? So that's an easy way to add that so that you can still speak to it in interviews. It highlights your breadth of experience, but you're not having to add a ton of real estate to work that is no longer as impactful as where you're at right now.
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. Yes, because in the cases Deborah mentioned where you maybe want to show another role that did lead to a higher leadership role, or in the case of some people who work at companies that have a lot of influence with their name, or if they want to mention, oh, I worked at X company, and they're really good to mention, but maybe, as Deborah mentioned, not to kind of promote the ageist aspect into it, we can always tack on that line about previous roles include. So that's kind of a trick to show your previous experience without dating oneself unnecessarily or going into too much detail that's not really needed. So thanks for bringing that up, Deborah. And I'll briefly hop into another example just so you can see one more kind of example of how to weave in UVP, unique value proposition, throughout the resume. This client, not to be mistaken with the Janis Joplin, but Janis Joplin, executive version of Janis Joplin. She is, and at the time, was a chief executive officer, and she was applying for other CEO roles. But she really wanted to emphasize the fact that she was implemental in turning around businesses, leading businesses to profitability. And then she had a lot of M&A and business experience, like positioning businesses for sale. So within that, we really wanted to stress not that she's just the CEO, but that she's really key in performance turnaround and some of these integration and preparing businesses for exit. So here's mentioned that she's a three-time middle market CEO, which kind of shows that she has a lot of experience, not once, not twice, but three times, has this experience in that middle market. And two successful and timely exits. So again, it's kind of emphasizing that she is very well versed in preparing companies for sale, being involved with successful sale of businesses. She also is an inspirational leader, are very gifted in empowering, coaching employees and the organizational culture aspect. So between the main areas of her UVP were really the value with the organizational culture and people leadership, but also performance turnaround, as you can see from kind of the second to bottom point under the executive profile, that she turned around multiple businesses to achieve profitability and exceed EBITDA expectations. So you'll see that as a theme throughout her resume, in addition to being a great people leader and affecting organizational culture. So then moving down to the skills section, we listed again the 7 to 12 skills, in this case, 9 here. And what's mentioned is mergers and acquisition as well, which kind of also goes with that preparing company for successful exit. And intentional culture creation, that goes back to the point that she is very big and implemental on organizational culture and crafting that, which we had mentioned in the executive profile, which kind of goes also with her UVP statement about really being a great agent in companies for affecting organizational culture and change there. And then again, this point on turnaround and restructuring is huge because that's really what she's focusing on with different companies, not just leading and being a CEO, which is fabulous, but that she really is gifted at turning around performance for those companies that were either suffering or kind of coasting along, that she really knows how to get in there and drive profitability. So I'll kind of skip to company 2 under the experience section. Company 1 at the time, she had, while she was working with us, actually got a role, which is fabulous. So the company 2 is kind of the role in which when she came and worked with us at DNS. So I'll kind of focus on some things here. So highlighted under CEO, even in the first line, you can see successfully turned around a product-led growth software business after 2 years of declining revenue. And then she, as mentioned, restructured this business and divested underperforming acquisitions. So again, this is really going back to her unique value of being able to turn around companies, especially after, in this case, the 2 years of declining revenue is huge that she got in there. And the first bullet under the key achievements drove major performance turnaround in 12 months, and then achieving the cash flow break even 9 months ahead of plan, which shows that she not only gets in there, but she does it in an even quicker timeline than what would normally be expected. And again, this latter part, positioning the $15 million business for a successful sale, which goes into the fact at the top, what that was mentioned with 2 successful, exits, and that she really is key in not only the business and performance turnaround, positioning companies for sale. You can see this throughout the resume too, under this position as well, where she negotiated the sale of the company at 3.5 times valuation. And additional points that just really reemphasize her growth initiatives within companies. She expanded a vertical 45% year over year. Yeah, so all of these points under President of Partner Solutions of Company 4. The last point, achieve 5x growth. And the first bullet point, executed the successful performance turnaround of the declining business unit from negative 10% to positive 10% growth. So that's major. And again, all going back to her unique value of being able to completely turn around these companies. So yes, again, as mentioned, we went back here to 2011, 2012, and she wanted to include a little bit about her former roles that weren't as senior, but still showed that she kind of worked her way up. So as Debra mentioned as well from before, we can always tack on a former roles include, and then maybe mention the title to the name of companies, but not go into too much detail since we don't want to get too far back in time. And so education and training, of course, in this case, again, highest level of experience in education, normally recommended to put up top. And she also had a training certification we included. And then in this case, board positions. So affiliations are great if, let's say, that you don't have a board role and you want to mention memberships. But in the case where you have board roles and positions, I wanted to specifically call out this section as board positions, which kind of shows that she is well versed in roles within a few different boards. So Yes, that is. I hope this is very helpful in terms of how to show ways to show how you can incorporate your unique value proposition in the resume, not just in the executive profile, but throughout. That's what I got for you. I'll
Yeah,
stop the share
there were
unless
a
Deborah,
couple.
you want me to keep it up.
Yeah, no, there was a couple questions in the chat, and this was really great. I appreciate you walking us through this, Lesley, and thanks, Amanda, for your feedback. Anyone else? How's this landing? Is this helpful? How are you feeling? And while you're adding that, Lesley, tell us about if you've been in a company a long time, or you've had several promotions within a company. How are you presenting that on your resume? What does that look like?
Yes, absolutely. So I think it's wonderful for those that have been promoted several times. Um, in some cases, I always think it can be helpful to have a line or under key achievements that may even mention that you're promoted from one role to the next, and maybe the reason why, if possible, and succinct. That's one thing I would say. Sometimes, and I don't know if this may hit on who asked that question. Sometimes I have the question of, okay, I've been at a company a certain amount of time. I've had, let's say, 10 or 15 years since I've been within a company, but some of my responsibilities have kind of added on each other over time. Should I distinctly separate those roles or not? So, in the case, and this may also give some more background on the kind of promotional aspect. In the case where someone's had a role and then over time the responsibilities have expanded, it is okay to also list the primary role. But then if you want to show that you've kind of expanded over time within that that role that has accumulated with responsibility, you can also mention within that specific role, accomplished or been promoted several times throughout 15-year tenure and then mention some of those promotions as well. So there's different ways to tackle it because we find that often where you're in a position and you get promoted and you don't necessarily go distinctly and separate your tasks, but they kind of build upon each other. So that's another way also to mention your main achievements, but then show, okay, promoted and basically achieved upward mobility or whatever the way to phrase it is within a company from different time periods. So I hope that answers your question.
Um, Perfect. So what we're going to do next is really dig into our own unique value, right, while we go through this. And before I do that, there was one more question I'll speak to in the chat. And then if anyone wants to, again, learn more about our work, how we can help with any of these things, whether it comes from the choosing, your ideal next role, building your unique value proposition, physically going through the process of writing your resume with Lesley, things like that, reach out to Carmen Poff on our team to learn more about how that works. But okay, so we're gonna do it together. One more quick person asked about how many years you need to include. 10 to 15 is really enough for an executive resume, and then you can have the previous roles include line there. And then also somebody asked about having fractional or interim work at the top if that's what you're doing while you're job seeking. Couple of quick things, and that's it's a whole separate conversation, but career gaps are more common now, and it's okay to have a gap, usually up to about a year, as long as we can account for what you're doing during that time. But I don't love to start with that fractional work at the very top because it's immediately diluting your highest level role and your highest level title. And so you don't want to lead with that. So I prefer to start with your most recent work as it relates to the ideal next role you're looking for, and then have a separate section at the bottom below that saying consulting work. And then that way you can still speak to an interview of what you've been doing, but it's not diluting the value of the work that you're doing now or the work that you had most recently done, right? And especially because as more and more people just add placeholders there of consulting work that aren't real, people are now, recruiters and hiring managers are now really conditioned to ignore that and just see it as a space holder. It's not really adding a whole lot of value at this point. Um, okay, so I want to make sure we have enough time to at least get started on this activity. We could answer questions all day long, but I do want to make sure we get to some of this. So we're going to talk about our own unique value. I'm going to screen share. Feel free to take a screenshot of this so that you can think about it later because I don't expect anyone to get done with this activity today because that could be a half day workshop. But I do want us to start thinking about it so that you can come away with some tangible ways to immediately elevate your own documents and unique value in your search. So I am going to take us through this here. There's three parts to really defining your unique value in the market. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Not yet. It
I'm
just says start
yeah,
its screen share. There it goes.
There we go.
okay. Don't know why
Gotcha.
it was slow. I'm in a hotel today, so that's also why I have the world's most terrible lighting and really boring background. Um, but uh, but okay, so the first part of this is really identifying your ideal next role. That is absolutely critical to not only identifying your unique value, but really having an effective executive job search, right? Because having an ideal next role really helps you understand who you're talking to. It narrows in your unique value. It helps you narrow in exactly what to include on your resume. It helps you think about who you need to be meeting in your interview or in your networking strategy, your go to market strategy for your job search, and on and on and on. So, everyone who hears me speak hears me get on a stump speech about this the whole time. So I apologize. But let's talk about your ideal next role. We're talking, what is your target industry? Maybe you have a couple industries. We can talk about that too. Um, but you really want to get as narrow as possible. And it's hard to want to specialize because we don't want to leave opportunities on the table. But right now in this job market, people aren't hiring generalists. They're hiring specialists, a specialist surgeon who can come in and solve their challenges, right? And so we want to get really specific and speak exactly to that market and not, yeah, we're a marketing leader and we can market for anyone. That's not helpful. It's I come and help, early stage PE backed SaaS companies in the education tech sector get to Series C or something like that. You want to get really specific. So, ideal target industry, company size, location, ownership structure, um, your function for this company, or what areas would you lead? And then who's the decision maker, or who would you report to in this role? Who are you talking to in your resume? Because again, as our chief strategy officer, Michelle Merritt, always says, your resume is about you, but it's not for you. It's actually for that decision maker. We want to speak directly to them because your resume and your LinkedIn profile and everything else about your search is a marketing activity. So I'm going to stay on the screen for just a couple of minutes here while we pop in what our ideal next role is. And if anyone knows what that is for them, pop it in the chat just to kind of give people an idea. And if you have no idea and are stricken with panic by this, then call us because we can help. We have a director of coaching, Norma Davila, some of you may have met, and she can take you through exercises to really narrow this in. And so don't, if this causes panic, don't worry. There is support out there for this. All right. How are we doing? I'm gonna look at the chat here. I apologize if you guys can see all this on the screen. Oh, shoot. Strategic partnerships within the media and entertainment. Perfect, Victoria. VP leader, research and innovation or strategic operations, right? Um, Quick question. While you guys are jotting this down, I'll answer the question about cover letters. You can definitely add your unique value in a cover letter. At the executive level, you won't have as many opportunities to add cover letters as you would at earlier stages of your career. So, and not everyone reads them. And so make sure that the unique value and some of your key accomplishments don't only live in the cover letter because people may not see them. Okay. Let's see. CRO, CPO, Series B, C Ed Tech company. Perfect, Cassie. Policy and advocacy in higher education. Great. Okay, great. You guys are doing really, really well with these. Perfect. So we will move on. Again, if you need more time, take a screenshot, take as much time as you need on this because some people really know what they want and some people it's an exercise and that's okay. So we want to identify the key challenges facing this ideal industry, facing the decision makers who would be hiring you and the key challenges that are facing your functional peers in other companies like this, right? So what's happening in your industry that you can help solve for? What is happening? What's keeping the decision maker up at night that you could help solve for? And then what are your peers and other companies struggling with right now that would be, easy for you or that you would be able to kind of take the ball and run with faster? So I'm going to stay on the screen for a little bit here while we think about it. I know this one's a little bit harder to answer off the top of your head, so I'll give everyone an opportunity. And if anyone has any key challenges they want to just pop in the chat as examples, feel free. Understanding the business supply chain disruption. Oh, so true, Donna. That's a good one. Low performing organizations, growing companies that are hurting from scaling and maturing. Oh, so true.
I love that one.
Yeah. That process to scale and mature is painful. Can you restate the question? Yeah, Sharon, I think it'll make more sense when we get to the next thing. But what we want to do, oh, and I have identified key challenges twice, but the point is identifying what is happening in your industry. And the next piece of that, and maybe this will make it a little bit easier for you, is to identify how you're uniquely equipped to solve those. So how are you uniquely equipped to solve for those challenges? Um, will help you really build the value proposition that actually speaks directly to that audience. And so maybe having both questions together will make more sense. Is that better, Sharon? Oh, diversified revenue streams. That's a great one. Okay, great. Thanks, Sharon. Generational differences with 4 generations in the workforce. Oh, so true. Oh, yeah. So zoom out. Yeah, 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 absolutely. There you go. How's that, Jude? So, um, we're going to get into the next stage here, which is really the part that we're dealing with your specifically, your specific unique value. But how is this landing with everyone? Is this making sense? Is this really hard? Okay, good, Trisha. I'm glad it's not too hard. Our goal is not to torture people, so that's helpful. And Lesley and I have never done this presentation. This is the first time we're doing this specific presentation because we've seen a lot of people struggle with it lately. So wanted to make sure it's landing right. Yeah, Cassie, you feel like you're boxing yourself into areas and might not have as many opportunities. That's absolutely, this feels really uncomfortable. Um, but that's where the magic is in building an actual standout profile for your search because people aren't hiring generalists. And so if we can get really specific into exactly the challenges that are facing a company right now or the kind of company you want to work for, then you're going to stand out much more than the person who has 20 years of experience and deliverable results, right? Like that's not setting you apart. You can have a couple of different versions though. So you may have a couple of different versions of your resume for different industries that are focusing on different value. And that's why this isn't necessarily an activity in building a personal brand statement, because this isn't following you around as your North Star for who you are as a human. This is really as part of the marketing activity to make you stand out as a candidate for specific jobs. So you may have a couple of versions for different industries, and that's okay. And yeah, Laura, it's only hard because I need to do some focus work. I 100% agree. And that's what's sometimes hard. When people call us to talk about, helping with their job search, the very first question we ask is, um, what what is your ideal next role? What's next for you? And the reason we ask that is to see, do you have a focus? Because if not, we can't write a standout resume. We need to do some work on the front end first before we can really help build that narrative to make you stand out as an executive. job seeker. So Danielle, that was my mistake in building this morning. So that it is actually so identifying key challenges and then really what your role is in those challenges. So we're going to go to the next one here and ignore the headline because that's not what that is. My poor team can verify it's been an incredibly long week for me and I messed that up. So, okay, the next is all about you and how you're uniquely equipped to solve for those challenges. What are your skills, your attributes, your things in your background that speak directly to your ability to solve for those challenges, right? That you just identified in the beginning. And then what significant measurable results have you achieved in your role or in your background as it relates to these accomplishments or these challenges so that we can build accomplishment stories around these challenges. And that's not only helpful in your resume, but it's helpful to pull from for interviews too, because you'll have specifically accomplishment stories that focus on your ideal market ready for your interviews. So thinking about, some of the things that you've done that highlight your ability to solve for these key challenges. And then what other achievements maybe have you accomplished in your career that others haven't, right? So, you know, so for, someone who's focused on the higher education, right? Enrollment is definitely an issue right now. Where have you turned around enrollment for organizations for higher ed, things like that? Like, what do you do that your peers may not do? And this can be skills, it can be attributes, it can be specific achievements, but this helps you get to thinking about these things. And I'm going to look at the chat here.
Yeah, you've got a question in the chat here, Deborah, that a couple people want answered. So it's a good one
Okay, perfect. Let's see.
from Jean. Do
Also,
you want me
because
to
I'm in a
read it?
hotel working on one screen. Yes, can you read the question,
Okay.
please?
So yes, and so she's saying, how would you customize the resume if more relevant role was a couple of roles prior to the current one?
Love that question, Jean. And thank you, Carmen. That's Carmen Paul for everyone who doesn't know her. Um, okay, so this is a really great question. This is where in your resume you would have a section that we didn't have in these two example resumes, but you may be able to see on our website as examples of we like to have a career highlights section at the top. And that way, at the very top of your resume, after your summary section Lesley showed, you can have a career highlights and then focus on exactly the roles and accomplishments that speak to your ideal next role before getting into the chronological career information. And so it would just be like a one-liner, maybe 3 to 5 one-line accomplishments or roles or things that really speak directly to your ideal next role so that you're driving the focus to that before we get into the chronological work. And then again, focusing on where you're keeping your real estate on your resume, right? If your most recent role isn't directly focused to what you're looking at, don't make it the most meaty section with the most bullets. Maybe, speak to it a little bit so it doesn't look like you failed in that role. But then in the next role or beyond, wherever it is, then you can build out more information to show that unique value.
Hey, Deborah, this is Jane. So, thank you so much for answering that question. So, my resume actually, because the way it's formatted, my most relevant roles for the job that I'm targeting is on the second page, and it's very meaty. It takes up like 2/3 of the second page, but it is on the second page, and I don't know if I can use different format than chronological. So maybe do a functional resume for, I'm in finance. So chronological is very like
Right.
industry standard. But I was wondering if I can somehow bring that up in the front because I know most recruiters spend like 30 seconds just like glancing through and they just focus on the first couple of paragraphs rather than going to the second page. So I don't want to lose that like attention span, like
Right.
before they get to the most important part of my experience.
Oh, thank you, Lesley, for adding that. So thank you, Jean. So yeah, this is where you absolutely will want a career highlight section. A functional resume, especially for finance, is not going to be super effective. Recruiters and hiring managers hate them. So I wouldn't suggest moving to a functional, but you can do kind of a hybrid. And we're going to hop in here and see if there's an example. We're going off script here to do real time, see to see if there's an example of one that has a career highlight
Thank you
section.
so much, Debra, by the way. Really appreciate this.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to help. Let's see. So I think this one does. Oh, you know what? And Lesley did have one in the one that she showed. I lied. Sorry, Lesley.
It's okay.
Lesley absolutely had an example of this now that I'm seeing it live. But you're going to have, your summary section and then your key highlights at the top, and then get into your professional experience. And that way you can drive your highest value, the jobs that you want them to see you held at the very top before it comes to page 2.
And to add to
So
that too, which is great. Thanks for bringing that up, Deborah. And also on the professional title as well. That's where you can also, as mentioned, kind of target your ideal role. Doesn't just have to be your current role. Jean, if you feel comfortable sharing, do you mind if I ask what position title or role that you're most interested in?
Yeah, sure. It would be like managing director for middle, so right now, the role I'm looking for is a couple of roles before. It's more in fund finance role, but most recent couple of role has been in direct lending role. I'm sorry,
Oh,
I'm getting into very specific product types, which I'm sure I lost everyone right
don't
there.
worry.
no.
Yeah. So yeah, I just want to make sure like recruiter sees that, oh, she's applying for wrong product type because she only has experiences in middle market direct lending. But if you actually go to the second page, I have very extensive experience in fund finance, including like NAV facility, capital call line, management company lines. So I want to get to that page. Recruiters should get to that page before losing them completely on the first page.
Yes, no, and thank you for mentioning that. And yes, I think that in your case too, all the other ways too is to make sure, I think you were saying with that fund financing experience, also incorporate those in the skills section, which is going to be on the top of your resume as well. And you can definitely weave that into the executive profile, mentioning that experience as well, so that it is not lost. And if there's a title, I know you mentioned you're going for managing director, but mentioning in the title, a professional title of your resume under the header, the role that you are going for as well, especially because you have that specific experience, but just kind of mentioning up top. So there are different ways, like Deborah mentioned with the career highlights up top, also the skills that you do want to
Mhm.
show, putting that early on and then the professional title. So I hope that helps. And although I'm not a financial expert, it's okay. My husband's in finance and so I'm used to hearing like certain
Awesome.
terms. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, she has a pro in the house.
that's awesome.
Um,
I love it. So just so rephrase what you just said. Maybe I can just put like my expertise includes these products, and then I have extensive experience working for this organization from this period to this period, doing this kind of work just to customize for that specific role, right? Would that be
exactly. And I would
something?
take the dates out because they'll see it later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm in
Don't say
financial
this period to
services. I've been for over 30 years. Okay. So Jane, what Deborah and Lesley are saying about the career highlights, that's going to be important. And even on the formatting, put it towards the top. You have to be above the fold. The recruiters are going to
Mhm.
glance. They're going to spend maybe 2 minutes, if that much, looking at your
Exactly.
resume.
Right, right.
So I would pull out your career highlights at the top that focus on those 2 to 3 roles earlier for the position that you want,
Right.
and make it very clear and crisp at the top before you even go into your expertise. It's your summary statement and the
Mhm.
career highlights. Then that will pull them down to go to the second job.
Okay,
But
so
make
put my
make your
career
most recent
highlight.
job very
Right,
brief as well too. You don't want to
right.
spend 3 to 4 bullets explaining what your current or your last position was, because it's
Right.
going to take it longer to get back to the other part.
Right, exactly. So
Exactly.
just stop beating around bushes, just go to the point straight
Exactly.
away.
You
Just
got
put it
you're
out
in
there.
finance. You got to be direct.
Okay,
You're in finance. It's numbers. It's
right.
directness.
Okay,
Bam.
I love it. Thank
It's
you.
so funny that you say that, Jean. For any of you who don't follow our Chief Strategy Officer, Michelle Merritt, and Michelle, pop your LinkedIn in the chat. Michelle's on the call, but she posted a video today that, what did it say? You have to be unabashedly visible in your executive search. What was that?
Visible, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Be unabashedly visible. Claim what you do. Do it with confidence, because not only does it help you connect with the person reading the resume or the person in your network, demonstrating that confidence from the beginning helps you increase the offer that you get when it comes time to negotiate. So bring the confidence, don't fall back, which we're also tempted to do, saying we, I, etc. And instead really get out there and be visible, and don't be sorry about it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No one's going to pluck you out of obscurity, right? We need to be, we need to show up. And so, okay, I'm going to wrap this up for everyone who has to end right at the top of the hour. And then, Trisha, I will respond to your question here in a moment. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope this was helpful. If anyone has another couple seconds, please pop in the chat what tip was meant for you today, what really landed with you. I'd love to know what was most, what resonated, because that'll help us build our content in the future. But hope this was helpful. Really enjoyed this conversation. And again, if anyone wants to learn about how we can help focus your search, build your resume, LinkedIn profile, help you build a go-to-market strategy for your search, recruiter introductions, interview prep, compensation negotiation strategy with Michelle, then we are happy to help with any of those things. Reach out to Carmen on our team. Really glad to hear that this was helpful for everyone. Lesley and I had a blast doing it. So
Yeah, it was
perfect.
great.
So
I'm glad you guys really got value out of this session.
yeah, absolutely. And there was one question about how this relates to LinkedIn, and everything we talked about today relates directly to LinkedIn as well. You want your resume and LinkedIn to tell the same story. And a lot of people want to just not include a ton of information on LinkedIn because it's on their resume and vice versa. People are rarely going to see both. And so you want to include as much information on LinkedIn as you need to get someone to want to interview you, right? They're not always going to see both. And so you can treat them as two totally separate independent things telling the exact same story. Now on LinkedIn, it's going to be more conversational. You're going to maybe leave some numbers out that are proprietary. You're not going to include everything, but it is going to be sharing